and authenticity.
Good afternoon, welcome to City News here on Root FM 96.1. The news today is brought to you by our parent company, the Mustard Seed Communities, caring for the most vulnerable. Thanking our listeners on the 96.1 FM dial, and also persons tuning in via our website at rootsfmjamaica.com. I'm Owen Brown.
I am Marissa Williams.
And I'm Dudley Thompson.
Stand by for the news in detail. Welcome back. Minister of National Security Dr. Horace Chang is urging motorists to clear up their traffic tickets as the new e-ticketing is set to come into effect soon. Dr. Chang says the new system, which will begin operations in February, will make it difficult for offenders to avoid their fines. The new system provides officers the ability to issue a printed ticket on the spot with information about the offense, fine, court date, and other information. The system also allows authorities to instantly check outstanding tickets motorists may have, whether or not they are persons of interest or wanted. There is currently relief in place allowing motorists to benefit from the merit expungement for tickets accumulated between February 1, 2018 and January 31 this year. The National Compliance and Regulatory Authority, NCRA, risks Jamaica's believing special favors were granted to a cabinet minister's company that imported substandard rice last year if there is no explanation for why the products were released, the lobby group says. The Jamaica Accountability Meter portal JAM says in the absence of transparency from the NCRA and the Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Loris Edwards-Brown, questions of special favors would be reasonable surrounding the dealings with Blue Zone Limited. Health and Wellness Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton is the sole shareholder in the company. His son, Charles, is the managing director and one of 3 directors. Last December, it was reported that Edwards-Brown authorized the release of detained shipments of rice on July 20, the same day that test results from the Bureau of Standard Jamaica (BSJ) showed that the rice exceeded the maximum allowed broken kernels from grade A rice. The NCRA enforces standards established by the Bureau of Standard Jamaica. The Ministry of Health and Wellness says available vaccines are Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and Sinopharm. The Northeast Health Region says that in the area, which includes Portland, St. Mary, St. Anne, they can access their vaccine at facilities such as Port Antonio Health Center, Port Maria Health Center, the Sentence Bay Health Center. The Health Ministry says persons can also access their vaccines in the Western region, which includes Hanover, Trelawney, St. James, and Hanover. Residents in those areas can access vaccines at facilities such as the Lucy Health Center, Falmouth Health Center, the Montego Bay V Center, and Savannah Lamar Health Centers. Education Minister Favour Williams this afternoon called for the head of the Child Protection and Family Services Agency, Rosalie Gage Gray, to step down as the Public Service Commission looks into allegations of gross breach of her care against her. Further, Minister Williams said that she has asked for a permanent secretary to use administrative power in the matter, as she believes that the situation against Gage Gray is untenable and cannot be defended. An investigation by the Office of Children's Advocate cited gross breach of care in the controversial partnership between the CPFSA and American Carl Rabansky, who was flagged in the U.S. over inappropriate sexual contact with a child. Child's advocate Diane Gordon Harrison Her 93-page report contained 10 findings and 4 recommendations, one of which is for disciplinary action to be taken against Gage Gray for her gross breach of the duties of care due to wards of the state and former wards. Minister Williams said the OCA report had been forwarded to the police for further investigation. Meanwhile, the Education Minister has expressed shock at the level to which she was misled by the head of the CPFSA. Minister Williams believes Mrs. Gage Gray was not forthcoming about her organization's continued relationship with Karl Robanski's entity Embracing Orphans. This is despite her repeated call and checks to ensure that the relationship was severed. A report from the OCA's advocate outlined allegations of inappropriate contact with Mr. Robanski. This despite prior knowledge that his education certificate in the U.S. was suspended after he admitted to having sexual inappropriate conversation with a minor. The minister says that she was further caught off guard in the finding out with the lease from the property which houses the vulnerable children was transferred to another entity linked to Robanski's Embracing Orphans. She was speaking in the House of Representatives yesterday, and Minister Williams urged Mrs. Gage Gray to go on leave to facilitate further investigation. The Jamaica Association of Social Workers is calling for mandatory background checks for local and foreigners who intend to have direct interaction with vulnerable groups, including children, amidst the current scandal gripping the Child Protection and Family Services Agency, CPFSA. The Office of the Children's Advocate, OCA, has released an explosive report knocking the CPFSA's head after several wards were exposed to an American donor who was punished for indecent involvement with a minor. In a release on Wednesday, the JASW said that its first concern was for the children and young persons whose violation was the antecedents for the report. The JASW said that it hopes that the relevant authorities ensure that they were provided with the supportive services needed to help them recover from the experience and move on to live productive lives. However, the association wants to see systematic changes to prevent a recurrence of the breaches outlined in the OCA's report. Legal and Constitutional Affairs Minister Marlene Malahou-Fort has expressed disappointment in the parliamentary opposition for failing to nominate 2 of its members to sit on the Constitutional Reform Committee. The committee is to advise on a process of overall 60 years after independence, including the process of transitioning Jamaica to a republic. However, the opposition has maintained that the executive and judicial branches of government should be decolonized together and expressed concern on other matters, such as the review and possible amendment of the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedom. Prime Minister Andrew Holness was expected to name the members of the committee during the sitting of the House of Representatives on Tuesday. The committee should comprise representatives of the House of Parliament from the government and opposition, the Attorney General, the Solicitor General, and constitutional law experts, among others. And for news further afield, Colombia's Vice President said on Tuesday that her security team found more than 7 kilos of explosive buried next to a rural road that leads to her home in southwest Cuaco. She described the incident as an assassination attempt. And for news further afield, we join Jeffery Tavares for international stories.
Data trolls the top 40 as security forces clamp down on protesters.
Well, Peruvian authorities have declared an overnight curfew in parts of southern Peru as mass protests continue following the ouster and jailing of leftist President Pedro Castillo. At least 17 people were killed Monday after Peruvian security forces opened fire at anti-government protests.
A major computer failure at FAA impacting all U.S. flights.
This was a major computer failure that led to a nationwide ground stop. No flight in America was taking off for a couple of hours. The FAA has now lifted that ground stop and
Uranium detected at Heathrow Airport in London.
We
we know that this package was seized after it arrived at Heathrow Airport on the 29th of December. And according to The Sun, this package had arrived in Terminal 4 on a flight from Oman. It was in the hold of a passenger.
I am Jeffery Tavares for Roots FM News.
And those are the stories making City News standby for the weather report with Marcy Williams.
Good afternoon. This is the weather report, and I'm Martha Williams. There's a trough across Jamaica. The trough is expected to remain across the island for the next few days. This afternoon, there have been isolated showers across sections of southern parishes and particularly elsewhere. Tonight will be partly cloudy. The maximum temperature in Kingston today is 32 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow morning, we have been showers across north central and eastern parishes, and also we have been isolated afternoon showers across in the areas and sections of southern parishes. And also on Friday, will be partly cloudy in the morning with also isolated afternoon showers across eastern and central parishes. And regionally, there's a high pressure ridge across the Gulf of Mexico. And that was the weather report. Please stand by for Sports Link with Dudley Thompson.
It is now time for Sports Link. Roots on the 6.1 FM.
Hello dear sports fans, I'm Dudley Thompson and welcome to SportsLink. And we start with news on track and field. Director of the recent Pure Water JC Adnan Williams track and field meet was held on Saturday at JC as high praise for the JH. The event was a qualified meet for the Boys and Girls Championship to be held later this year. It was an official accreditation by JH and the Indus and ISA. McCain says the professionalism of display by officials contributed to the meet smooth running. He says the sport is local governing body should be highlighted for their contribution and improving the skills of track and field officials. On to news on cricket. Dr. Kishom Shallow, the president of the VP of the Cricket West Indies CWI, is dismissing rumors that Gray's contract as CEO has been extended by the board for a further 2 years. Grays was appointed Chief Executive Officer of Cricket West Indies by then President Dave Cameron on January 2017, replacing Michael Muirhead. Dr. Shallow also confirmed that the topic is not up for discussion on the agenda at the AGM to be held in March. He also stated that Gray's contract came to an end in June and has since not been renewed. On to news on football. Chris Darin was appointed chairman of the Jamaica Football Federation JFF Marketing Committee. Dennis Grant will be his deputy. The JFF hopes the changes will bring harmony into operations and a duty to its stakeholders. The JFF says the changes are part of their efforts to reposition the federation and strengthen the administration. Businessman Darin says the main focus of the preparation for the cricket girls for the 23 for this year's FIFA World Cup in Australia and New Zealand. The committee also consists of Stuart Jacobs, Nicole Bicknell. Darin will be allowed to add 2 other persons to that department. Still on football overseas now, Newcastle beat Leicester by 2-0 at St James Park to secure their spot in the League Cup semi-finals for the first time since 1976. Newcastle found the breakthrough in the hour mark when Dan Burn hit past goalkeeper Danny Ward. Newcastle scored again in 12 minutes later when Jotan Lachon scored into Miguel Afton pass before beating Ward for a second time. Meanwhile, Manchester United made it 8 consecutive wins in all competitions by beating Charlton 3-0 at Old Trafford to reach the semi-finals. Also, United manager Eric Ten Hag made 8 changes following Friday's FA Cup victory over Everton and handed 17-year-old midfielder Kobe Mino his debut and did disrupt the team's momentum. Now on to news on basketball. Defending champions Elite Horizon will seeking their second Elite A Caribbean basketball winter league win when they take on Elite Waves in the second match of the doubleheader at National Arena this evening at 8 p.m. Horizon started the defense of their title with a 114-162 win over Elite Storm, while Waves were 110-94 winners over Elite Rivers in the first match on Saturday. Basketball overseas now. Jimmy Butler led a record-breaking shooting display from the free throw line as Miami Heat claimed 112-111 win over the Oklahoma City Thunders. Miami Heat made all 40 of their free throw breakthrough record of 39-39 made by Utah Jazz Portland in 1982. Meanwhile, with 23, Butler has tied Dominic Williams for the second highest number of foul shot game without a miss. James Harden also recorded the most free throws in a game with a miss with 24 for the Houston Rockets in 2029. Butler scored the game high 35 points in total and final free throw with 12 seconds remaining to point the game into the winner. Elsewhere, there were three contrasting results for Stephen Curry as Joel Edmeyer and they're returning from injury. Curry was back from 11 games absent with a shoulder problem and secured 24 points for the Golden State Warriors, including 5 3-pointers. But what was not enough for his defending champions to avoid a 125-130 home defeat by the Phoenix Suns, after whom Michael Bridges stopped scoring with 26 points. Mbele, who missed 3 games with a foot injury, scored 30 points in 23 minutes on court at the Philadelphia 76ers romped 147-116 win over the Detroit Pistons. And on that note, we come now to the end of Sports Link for today.
And for a recap of our top stories, Minister of National Security Dr. Horace Chang is urging motorists to clear up their traffic tickets as the new e-ticketing is set to come into effect soon. The National Compliance and Regulatory Authority, NCRA, risks Jamaicans believing special favors were granted to a cabinet minister's company that imported substandard rice last year if there is no explanation for why the products were released, a lobby group says. The ministry says there are vaccines available, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and Sinopharm. And Education Minister Favour Williams yesterday called for the head of the Child Protection and Family Services Agency, CPFSA, to step down as the Public Service Commission looks into allegations of gross breach of care against her. And those were the stories making City News. The news today was brought to you by our parent company, the Mustard Seed Communities, caring for the most vulnerable. Thanking our listeners on the 96.1 FM dial, and also persons tuned via our website at rootsfmjamaica.com. I'm Owen Brown.
I am Marcel.
And I'm Dudley Thompson.
On behalf of the entire team, have a wonderful afternoon. Stand by for City Beat.
On the Child Protection Services of Jamaica. Agency of Jamaica, wherein the Minister of Education is not the CPA chairman resign. Should the Minister of Education resign, this child protection agency, this year has been going on from 2021. Wherein an American man came into Jamaica and sex class started so many young ladies. Should the Minister of Education resign? Join us at 1 p.m. Join us at 1 p.m. today. We'll be discussing more about this. Until then, I'm Jeffery Tavares saying thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening to our news from our sister station,
that was
Roots 96.1 FM. Until
City
1:30,
News and Sports. Now
we'll
we
be back
go to
live.
City Beat.
God bless.
With
Remember to like, share, and subscribe.
Williams.